We get to go the easier route where they're going to give me the information and all I have to do is come up with the equation. The reason that I say this is easier is that if you look at either of these equations up here at the top, the only thing that I need to finalize this equation is my center, HK, A, and B. So I just need 3 pieces of information and I'm done. All right, so let's start with the first example. They say find the standard form of the equation of the ellipse having foci at 0, 1, and 4, 1, and a major axis of length 6. Okay, now remember we said over here that the length of the major axis was going to be 2a. So when they tell me the length of the major axis is 6, then I know that 2a is equal to 6. So let's plot what we have. I've got the points 0, 1, and 4, 1. Lots of information that I can get from those foci. First off, what is my major axis going to be, horizontal or vertical? Horizontal. How do we know? Yes. Remember that we said the foci are always on the major axis. So because they are in a horizontal line, that means my major axis must be horizontal. I also can get my center from that. How can I find my center? Midpoint, right. The center is just going to be halfway between those two foci, right? So I can go through and I can say, okay, what's halfway in between 0 and 4? 2. So my center is going to be at 2, 1. So I could either go through and just kind of eyeball it, or I literally could algebraically compute it. In either case, I'm going to get my center at 2, 1. Now, we know that C is the distance from the center to the focus. So what is C going to be? 2, right. I could look at it here, or I could look at it here, either one, and I know my C value is 2. And since we've already established that the length of the major axis is 6, if 2a is equal to 6, what's a? 3. So if I know a and c, then I could use my equation up here to find b, right? So we could say that b squared is equal to a squared minus c squared. So a was 3, a squared is 9. C was 2, so c squared is 4. So that means that b squared is going to be 5, or b is going to be the square root of 5. So we said to create the equation we needed 3 things. We needed our center, a, and b. Got it. That's all that I need. So let's go ahead and create our equation. If my major axis is horizontal, then I'm going to pull this equation right here, and all I need to do is fill in my center, HK, my A value, and my B value. All right? So if we have our center 2, 1, then let's go ahead and put 2 in for H and 1 in for K. And if A was 3, then we can come down here. What's this denominator going to be? 9. And what's, if B was square root of 5, what's this denominator going to be? 5. So there's our equation. It's a little simpler than what we were having to do before. Grab your calculator if you would, please. So I'm going to go to apps. I'm going to choose the Conics app. And when I do, I get to choose which one of these that I want to work with. All right. So in this case, since we were just working with the ellipse, I'm going to choose number 2. I'm going to choose ellipse. And I love this because this is like the top of our note sheet, right? Not only do they give you the equations, but they also give you like which, this is the one that's major axis horizontal. This is the one that's major axis vertical. So you can choose which of those that you would like to work with. Now, what were we just working with? Major axis horizontal. So I'm going to choose that first option right there. And then it lets me go through and define what I want each of those pieces to be. All right. So we can go through the equation that we created. H was 2. K was 1. A was 3. and b was the square root of 5. Because notice you're putting in the a and the b values before they got squared. Okay, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, okay, a is 3, enter. B is the square root of 5. And when I put square root of 5 in, it's going to convert it to a decimal when I hit enter, but that's okay. And then H was 2, and K was 1. And if I go to graph, it will graph that for me as well. Fun, right? All right, so let's go back and say that we were looking at the parabolas because we've also studied those, right? So let's say instead when we started here we had chosen option number 4, parabolas. Same scenario. This is like the top of our note sheet right here. So this is the one that has a horizontal axis. This is the one that had a vertical axis. And we could go through and we could choose whichever one of those that we wanted. And we could put in H and K and P. And we could get it to graph our parabola for it. And as we go on and study hyperbolas, we'll be able to do the same thing with those as well. So play around with that a little bit if you would like to. And I'm going to quit out of it for right now. So just a review of the things that we were talking about there. If you go to your apps and you go to conics, you'll be able to choose from any of the conic sections that we're studying. We chose Ellipse since that's the one that we had just done, and we put in the information from example 1 that we had just done. And you'll notice that it was able to generate the graph for us. You'll see it's the same as the one there on page 706 in your textbook. We also went back, since we've done parabolas already, and played around a little bit with that one and looked at what that might look at. We didn't go ahead and plug in numbers, but I did here for you just so that you could see if you did put in numbers and asked it to graph it, that it would graph that parabola for you as well. So really fun app. You're welcome to utilize that for your test. So play around with that if you would like to. So let's look at this one together. I specifically wanted this one because it gave us different information than we had last time. So for this one, they told me I have vertices at 0, 8 and 0, -8. And I have foci at 0, 4 and 0, -4. So from that, tell me everything that I know. What you got? All right, major axis is vertical. How'd you know that?
Because y and the vertex is height.
Okay. If they had given me either of these pieces of information, I would have known the major axis was vertical, right? Because the vertices are always the endpoints of the major axis. So since they were vertical, that would have told me. Or the foci are always on the major axis. So since they were vertical, that would have told me. So either one of those. Great. What else do I know?
The center.
I know the center. How do I find that?
The midpoint of either the vertices or the foci.
Perfect. The midpoint of either of these sets of points they gave me. So I could go halfway in between 0, 8 and 0, -8. Or I could go halfway in between 0, 4 and 0, -4. Because my center always has to be equidistant from the two vertices, and it has to be equidistant from each of the foci. All right. Then what else do I know? Anything else?
You can find the ones on the side.
Okay.
You know A and C.
I know A and C, and then from that, then yes, I could find the ones on the side. So how do I know A?
Find the distance from the center to the vertices.
Yes, A is the distance from the center to the vertices. And then how do I find C? Distance from the center to the what?
Okay.
And I already know that as well, right? Okay, so lots of information, and then of course once I knew A and C, I could find B. So you nailed it. Those are all the things that we could get from this. So if our center is going to be halfway in between either 0, 4, 0, -4 or 0, 8, 0, -8, it's going to be at 0, 0. You've already told me that the major axis is going to be vertical. What's my A value going to be? 8. What is my C value going to be? 4. So then let's use those to find B. So we're going to use that equation, B squared is equal to A squared minus C squared. Now, unless you're putting this in that conics app that we were just looking at on the calculator, because when you put it in, you do have to put in A and B, not A squared and B squared, right? But unless you're doing that, there's really not a need, when I get B squared is equal to 48, there's really not a need to go through and take the square root of both sides and simplify that radical or switch it to a decimal or whatever, because when you go to put it into the formula, you put in B squared, right? So save yourself a little bit of time and effort there, and I'm just going to leave it as B squared. All right? So I'm going to go through. I need to put in HK. So what's HK? 0, 0. Perfect. So those are going to drop out. And we just mentioned that B squared was 48. What is A squared?
64.
64, right, because A was 8. Then we would have 64. And again, if I were wanting to put this into that conics app, or for some other reason I needed to find the B value, I definitely could do that, but not necessary if I'm just creating the equation. So I could simplify that a little bit. There's no need to leave it x minus 0 squared. I could just simplify that down to x squared, and same story here, simplify that down to y squared.